Good afternoon and welcome. I'm Julia Emmerich, Managing Director of Events and Operations for the Westchester County Association. It is my pleasure to welcome you to another live WCA video chat. Today we're talking about the best practices in virtual meetings and events from two experts in the hospitality industry. During this global pandemic, in-person events are not safe, but there is an opportunity to reimagine them, use technology to produce compelling and impactful virtual meetings and events for both nonprofit organizations and corporations. Before I introduce today's guests, I would like to thank WCA Platinum investors who support the WCA all year round and help make this type of programming possible. Now it's my pleasure to introduce today's first guest, WCA Platinum member Joe Gilderson, President of Corporate Audiovisual Services, a specialist in cutting-edge audio, video, lighting, and staging solutions for live and virtual events. Welcome, Joe.
Hey, thank you, Julia. It's great to be here today.
And second, I'd like to introduce Robert Sanders, the founder and chairman of Hospitality Resource Group, also known as HRG, a vertically integrated group of 3 companies specializing in event solutions, training, and communications. Robert, welcome.
Julia, thank you so much. Great to be with you. Hi, Joe. Good afternoon.
Hey, good to see you, Robert.
So for those of you live, please feel free to ask questions throughout the show by typing comments in the comments section, and we'll try to get to as many questions as possible before the end of the show. With that, let's get started. Why don't we start talking about the type of conversations that you both are having with your clients about pivoting from live in-person events to virtual event experiences. Robert, would you like to start?
Absolutely. So when this whole thing happened, as of today, it was 48 days now, no one really expected the severity of this. And when we think about looking at a virtual event versus a live events are certainly our preferred method, there's no doubt, because it brings people together in a better fashion. But a virtual event is a great option. Our clients, we're saying to them, don't panic. There is a solution, whether you're in nonprofit sector, healthcare, higher education, whatever it might be, there is a solution for your event. It's about coming together and having that exact conversation with your team saying, what's the best fit for us as an organization?
Joe, how about you?
Yeah, I think Robert's right on point. This happened very quickly. You know, I told our team it was kind of like we're driving on the highway. We're doing 65 miles an hour, and all of a sudden we have to slam on the brakes, because that's really what it felt like. We had about 70 events that were scheduled for the spring that all of those people had to decide what to do. So were they going to cancel? Were they going to postpone? You know, and then virtual was the next step, and it seemed like a very logical move for a lot of people. But just as Robert was saying, you have to really know the purpose of the event and the fabric of the event to make the right decision. So that's where we spent a lot of time talking to our clients, trying to figure out what is the best move for them.
That's great. Now, given some of the technologies that were already in place and some emerging technologies that are coming out now, what's out there to help execute a really successful virtual meeting or an event? Joe, do you want to start that off?
Sure, I would be happy to. You know, the reality is we've been streaming events, mostly corporate meetings and conferences, for about 12 years or so. So technology has been out there for a while. It's just a question of what's the right technology. And at this point, you know, it kind of breaks down to live streaming and webcasting or webinars, and then video conferencing, which is the hottest platform out there right now is certainly Zoom, without a question. That's like, you hear that in your sleep right now, you know. But Zoom is a video conferencing platform. There's many others as well, such as Blue Jeans or WebEx. Google has Hangouts, now it's going to be Google Meet. There's a lot of different technologies that currently exist. And again, it's just trying to match up what are you trying to do with the right software.
And Robert, how about you? What technologies do you think are becoming the most important?
Yeah, I think the ones that bring, again, Zoom, we're all doing Zoom conferences on a regular basis and such like that. And with a live event or virtual events, a Zoom is very difficult to do because there's so many facets to it, and the bandwidth is very difficult to pull together. So again, having your own live stream is really the way to go, I think. To Joe's point, one of the things we talk with our clients about as well is, when you start to re-engineer your event a little bit, what does it look like? Maybe it's a hybrid of a live event and a virtual event. We're not going to really understand a lot of that until we get more information from the governor and as things move, towards the summer months and such like that. But again, leveraging all the technology that's out there is going to be at least helpful. Imagine this scenario 5 years ago or 10 years ago, what we would look like. We would not be having this conversation more than likely at this point. So leveraging all those meetings is very important.
Great, thank you. That's very helpful. Now, let's talk a little bit, diving into some of the tools that are available to engage an audience, right? And purpose of having an event or a meeting is to get an important message across. It's to do fundraising. It's for branding and marketing. It could be for internal and external purposes. So, what are some of the tools that you might recommend or that you used that others can benefit from?
Robert, Robert?
Go ahead, Joe.
Sure. I think it breaks down into what type of event you're going to have first. If it's going to be a fundraising event, certainly you have a number of different factors, whether it's sponsors or there's going to be some online donations or raffles or some other piece like that. So those are all ways to engage with people. On the corporate side, there's many different tools, to be honest. It just depends on the scenario, but you're talking about chats, polling tools. The great thing with a polling tool is that you literally ask a question, you get immediate feedback. Like, who doesn't want that, right?
Right.
Then you have, of course, Q&A scenes that you can set question and answers. Your moderator can receive questions. I mean, there's a lot of ways to interact. But I'm sure Robert's got a few other points, too.
Sure. It's all about what's your end game, right? What are you trying to, if it's so on a corporate side, is it a town hall where you have a CEO wants to deliver a message to the team saying, this is where we're going, this is our, something along those lines. Or if it's a smaller group that you want to have an internal meeting, and even having breakout sessions is a possibility now, which is great. You can go into a general session and have the keynote present, and then literally break off into breakouts and have that great interaction. So that's a great tool that's out there now, which you think is terrific. The polling feature you mentioned, Joe, is great because it does garner that immediate feedback that people need. Right now, one of the most difficult things we're all facing is that we're all pulled apart. We can't be together like we normally are. So that information, that communication is so critically important. And to your point, Julia, about the engagement on the nonprofit side of things, that's the number one concern is how do we engage people and have a fun event where they're looking at relevant content where people can come in and say, I'm going to leave this with a better understanding, but not bore them. We're looking at probably a 60-minute window for an online virtual event versus having a 3 to 4 hour event. So there's a lot of things that come into play from that standpoint.
Yeah, that's a great point. I was actually just going to ask a follow-up question on that about some advice you might have about the change of length of time and the way that your content is presented. Obviously, there's new opportunities that you can use when you're doing things virtually, like bringing a guest speaker in from Australia that you couldn't otherwise fly in, but now they can come in virtually. But also there's probably some pitfalls that you want to avoid, expecting maybe a 4-hour event where there would be networking, there might be different parts of the event where people break off. So can you maybe talk a little bit about that, Joe?
Sure. And again, I think it goes to what is the event and what's its purpose. But as far as people's attention span, that's a real issue. Right. I don't think there's any question about that.
No doubt.
Just think of how an average song, which used to be 5 or 6 minutes, is now down to like 2.5 or 2:20. It's like a movie that if you try to watch a movie from 1975 now, you're going to turn it off. It's just too long. But that's the way these events are. So from a 4-hour event, like Robert said, an hour is probably around the max, unless it's a training session it's a little bit different. But you don't see too many events online that go longer than, an hour to 2 hours if it's a heavy training session. It's just hard to stay seated and in the same position for all that time, right?
And the other big factor there as well is we're all home. So again, if you have children at the house or something like that, it's hard to have that longer time period where you're not responsible for that. On a conference side, looking at the corporate piece, if you have a meeting, we have some of our clients breaking into pieces. They do an hour and a half every other week where they go in and they want to get their training in or whatever it's going to be. So there's lots of ways to break it up like that as well. You need to know the audience. That's what you mentioned, Joe, earlier, which is critical. But what is your desired outcome? What's the outcome and the key deliverable of the meeting? Then you build it from there.
And what about decisions? How are organizations making decisions about maybe an event or a meeting that was normally private, by invitation only, maybe a paid ticket, to now an opportunity to make it a more public experience? What is some advice or thoughts in that? Robert, maybe you want to start off?
Sure. No, it's a great point. And, there are two basic platforms, a public and a private. The advantage of a private is that you're doing the invitations out to your constituents, your sponsors, your key people, and they're coming in to whatever platform you use, whether it's the website or whatever it might be. They're registering, you're capturing your information, which is a great thing. You can get great analytics as far as who attended, how long, if there were breakout sessions involved, did they go, where did they go? So from the standpoint of having a private event, you can actually gather information a lot better. Public, though, you mentioned having the international scope. It allows you to open up those borders, literally, and have people from all over the world join a particular event. Now, time zones are, of course, always an issue. You have to pay attention to that. But still, it allows you to open the landscape. We have a lot of our clients who are doing that and bringing people in from all over the world. And that's a great advantage in helping drive more attendance to see what your event is. But again, it goes back to what is that deliverable for you. That's not good for all organizations to have people see, that type of thing.
And then just to follow up on that, as Robert was saying with the public and private balance, in reality, there's just so many ways you can do things too. You can actually establish it so that we'll say the general session is public, but then there's breakout rooms that are private and assigned to people. Or you could have a VIP area, which is only for X number of people. They've pre-registered, they've paid for a ticket, but then you have a public, we'll call it dinner. Right. But the tools are they're so different than being in a ballroom in that sense. Your creativity are the boundaries more than anything else, more than the four walls.
Right.
What do you want to try to do, and can you do it? Well, there's usually a way. You just have to think through it a little bit.
Absolutely. And there's also an opportunity here for hybrid events, right? That's where we're going right now. Again, depending on once we understand from the governor what we're allowed to do. So let's say we're allowed to have 100 people or 50 people. So we have a live event for 50 people and the balance are virtual. So maybe you bring the board of directors and the key sponsors and honorees together for a nice VIP cocktail reception, and then they experience a virtual event together, something like that. So again, to your point, be creative, think outside the box. Don't be narrow-minded about it. Be open-minded to thinking differently about it. Obviously, this is new for everybody. And we have to adapt as we go. We'll know a lot more next month than we do this month about this platform or what we're allowed to do.
That's great. And you mentioned the word stakeholders, and I just wanted to follow up on that. Who, similar to a live event, but maybe even, someone pointed out some of the differences when it's virtual. Who are the key people that should be around the table? Maybe you can break it out, corporate versus nonprofit, and what those conversations look like, and how your teams and your partners, help kind of consult and advise. Robert, do you want to take that one first?
Absolutely. And the first conversation we had was, do you want to cancel the event? And that was the first reaction, 8 weeks ago, was we have to cancel. And our first response was, no, you don't. Let's think about it. Let's re-engineer it. So we're talking, if it's on the nonprofit side, the executive directors, the CEOs, what have you, to have that discussion, to start talking the what ifs. What if we did it a little bit differently? Can we still give sponsor value? Which again, for a nonprofit is a huge part of what they do. So the answer is yes, you can. You do it differently. Maybe you don't tell a sponsor, okay, here's what you're going to get for your sponsor dollars, but maybe ask the question, what would be good for you as the key sponsor? So ask those questions of them. So really getting that conversation going with the committees, the fundraising committee, and just start to build it out. And then doing the run of show. What might it look like? That's the key thing. The beginning, the middle, the end. If we're looking at an hour, we only have so much we can cover at one time. What could that look like? And then leveraging the technology above and beyond that for future information. The beauty of these type things is everything's recorded. And since everything's digital now, we can break it into pieces. So if you have a key sponsor, you can give them their sponsorship piece. They can then send it out to their internal company and say, look, guys, we did a sponsor of this great organization, and they feel good about that. So it's really getting the internal committees to think about those type of things and how do we get that engagement.
And then on the
Joe,
corporate side,
are you seeing stakeholders?
On the nonprofits, I think Robert's hit it right on the head. On the corporate side, you're now dealing a lot more with the marketing departments, whereas they might not have been directly involved on a special event or a live event or an internal training meeting. They would usually be on the external facing events, like a big sales presentation or a product launch. But they're getting involved now because of just the reach can be so different. I mean, and you also have to put the company in a good light at this point in time too. And there are a number of really good stories out there about organizations just doing incredible things to help out during the pandemic. I mean, we were talking to a client earlier that, they happen to be a hospital and they're considered heroes at this point, everybody who's working during the situation. But a corporate marketing department has recognized that this event could touch 100 times more people, 1,000 times more people, based on getting it out to the multiple platforms and the number of views. So they're kind of a new stakeholder in the event side for virtual.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And I think one key point there as well, to piggyback on that, if you go this route and you do expand your outreach, which is great, the one thing that you have to do it's not even negotiable, it has to be professional, right? You have to do it the right way. You have to produce the event, because if you don't do it the right way, it's not going to come off the way you want it. It's going to be almost detrimental. So we see some of our clients were talking, well, what if we used our cell phones and we did, FaceTime and such like that? And it just doesn't work, because there's too many variables involved with this. And again, obviously with so many people at home now, bandwidth is an issue. It's a challenge, but do it the right way. And I understand budget is always a challenge, but look at the things that you're not spending money on. If you're doing a virtual event, you're not spending money on catering and such like that. So where's the balance of the two? But do it the right way, represent your organization in the right light, because it's way worth it in the end to leave it saying, wow, that was really fabulous. And someone coming in and leaving that saying, I learned more about the organization. I want to be a part of that, whether it's on a volunteer basis, a sponsor basis, whatever it is. That's the opportunity you have to expand that horizon big time.
That's great. And actually use the word bandwidth, which brings me to my next question about some of the best practices in preparing, right? So there's a lot of, more so even than perhaps even live and in-person events, the prep, the run through, the scripting, production, internet, there's a lot of moving parts. Joe, maybe you want to just tackle some of those and give some advice to those who are tuning in. That would be great.
Sure. Look, as you just mentioned, the internet has got to be your first step. When we're going to do a virtual event, we're actually talking to presenters ahead of time, because we need to actually test live in one of these video conference type of settings what kind of connection they do have. I mean, the recommendation is certainly to be a hardwired connection. As we discussed, sometimes one brand is a little bit better than another because of the way it delivers bandwidth.
Yeah, just talked about that.
Right. There's also, people have different situations. What if you're in a house like I am with two teenagers that play video games all the time, and those are all downloaded games at this point? I mean, you have to consider what else is going on in the house. You want to try to keep the background noise down like that. I have a sign on the door right now written in 2 languages to try to keep people out and keep them quiet. And then, of course, this morning before going on a meeting, the neighbor wanted to cut his grass because it wasn't raining for 5 minutes. So, I mean, you can't make this stuff up, some of it, but you just have to be very cognizant of it, about trying to keep noise down. Try to pay attention to what's behind you, because people are looking at what's behind you. There's distractions that don't exist in, a face-to-face meeting. Things like making sure the microphone works. Usually that's only my job, but now that's everybody's job, But if they can't hear you, it's over. I mean, it really is. But the biggest thing I could say, honestly, is run through practice. Just keep trying to make sure you can get it right. Because right now, I'm talking to a camera. I'm not talking to a person, really. And you have to get used to that, because you can't play off of an audience, so to speak. It's an unusual situation. So you have to actually do it and practice it and try it.
And one of the things, Julia, we talked a lot about is how does the event play itself out? So there's different ways you can do it. Scenario 1 could be a live MC with some recorded videos and then going to a couple of cut-throughs. They're saying, now we're going live to Joe Gilderson and he does his piece, what have you. Again, bring the excitement into the event, if at all possible. It's not always applicable, but if possible. Because people want to see a live show when they can. And have it well scripted. Less is definitely more as relates to the content and the words. Keep it concise and such. And then the second opportunity could be just an MC only, where he or she is literally facilitating the entire event. And it comes back to them, it comes back. But again, it brings you the live element, which is really important. And then the third piece, which a lot of clients are opting to do, is they want the whole thing pre-recorded, where they know it's 48-minute runtime, it's pre-done, it looks great, sounds great. So again, every event is different, but if you have the opportunity to get a live piece in there, it really is better, there's no doubt.
That's great, and I'm told that we have a question from the audience.
Okay.
We can get to. It says, what message do you give to those already purchased tickets and tables? We would also like to open up to larger audience who will not pay. Robert, I see you nodding your head. You have some thoughts there?
Yeah. This is a big challenge. So a couple of things. Number one, on the sponsorship side, I would throw a number of 95% of the people who have bought sponsorships for organizations for the spring are not asking for their dollars back. They understand the mission of the organization, they understand where we are right now, and they just want to be involved in it. Some do, but the majority do not. So what I would recommend is reaching out to them and saying, okay, this is our new platform, this is the process, what's good for you? Renegotiate what that level of sponsorship is and figure out what's good for them. They'll have that answer. If somebody has already paid for a ticket and they're going to be coming live, that's great. And you would say to them, we'd love to have you still participating in the event because you're supporting the organization. And I'm talking the nonprofit sector now. Corporate is a little bit different, of course. So, most people will say, yes, I get that. And they're not going to want their money back, but they want to participate in the event. If you want to go to the larger scenario, where it's public, you can still invite additional people in. And as Joe mentioned earlier, more of the hybrid. Some public, some private. You can do it that way as well. But it's all about the organization and about sending the mission out to a large group if that's what you want to do. But you have to have them buy into that and say, yes, I know the money I'm giving you is incredibly important right now. You look at Feeding Westchester, you're looking at these different organizations who are doing miraculous work at this point. So it's a matter of, communicating to those folks who are involved in your organization and sending that message like, listen, we need your help. And the bottom line is, we do.
Joe, before you chime in, there is another audience question that's sort of similar, so we're going to bring it up right now. In terms of raising revenue, do you think participants will pay to attend, or would it primarily be through sponsorships and or underwriting?
Well, I think that, again, depends on the event, certainly. Right now, what I'm hearing from a lot of our clients is in their heads, they're having a hard time charging people for a training meeting or something at this exact second. Because, we're just in the throes of, a giant problem that we've never seen before. So it's understandable. But in the near future, that's going to change. That is the reality. And you're going to have to charge some sort of money because the material does have value. The message does have value if it's from a training or educational standpoint. And certainly from the nonprofits, I mean, they're in a time of need. That is a very real issue. Just like every small business, the nonprofits are in a time of need too. And I'm not ignoring the large corporate organizations either. I mean, there's certainly sponsorships. There's a lot of ways to get their brand and get their message out even further at this point using a digital platform. And so that is a great idea as far as how to underwrite or pay for some things. But the reality is people have been charging money for digital conferences and events for years. And any of the self-help education world has been charging money for their material for decades.
Right.
So the platform already exists. It's just a matter of applying it to your event.
And the idea, even with live events going way back, the underwriting of an event was always there anyway. When organizations made their money, their net money for the organization, it wasn't on ticket sales. It's on your sponsorships, underwriting. That's where the dollars are anyway. It's always been that way. So the ticket sales are important, of course. And again, the old saying, skin in the game. There's a big debate about, if I pay something to attend, I'm more motivated to actually come to the event and do all of that. But it's a mission-driven conversation. If you can get that, that individual, that corporation, whomever it is, to feel your mission and to really believe in what you're doing, they'll spend the money. There's no doubt. And that's going to continue to evolve as you get into July, into September, into later part of the year. It's going to all change. So if you have a chance to charge, I mean, certainly that's what you want to do. But again, going back to our earlier discussion about what's your key deliverable, sometimes it's not monetary. Sometimes it's about talking about your mission, about getting your branding out there to people. And that's a lot of times more important than a monetary scenario.
And we're coming to the end of our segment, and obviously you have provided, both of you, some great intel and information. And obviously we're in an evolving period where every day we learn something new. Every day there's a new press conference that tells rules and restrictions as it relates to the entire hospitality industry. So perhaps we get back together again in a few months and we revisit it and see what's working, what's not working. But perhaps as a final question, is there any piece of advice that you'd like to give to the audience today as a key takeaway, something actionable that they can go back to be thinking about differently for whether it's a small meeting all the way up to perhaps a huge fundraiser or gala? Robert, do you want to start off?
Sure. I would say very simply, just remain open-minded about it, right? It's a brand new thing for a lot of us. We're learning as we go. Don't just shut it down. Have the conversation. Bring in your key stakeholders. Let them drive the conversation. If it's a board of directors or a committee, whomever it might be, your staff as well. They're all scattered everywhere. Get them involved in it. Don't just shut everything down and have the conversation. Brainstorming is a great thing, and great things come from those kind of conversations. But it also engages people as part of the process, right? So just be open-minded. Look at all the options. Joe mentioned earlier about being creative. I think that's absolutely 1,000% correct. Do things differently, and because we don't have a choice right now, right? This is not something we asked for. It's something we're being told to do. So let's adapt to it the best we can. Let's all work together as a team, internally and externally, and let's stay healthy, and let's see what tomorrow brings.
Joe?
Yeah, no, that's very well said. We all have to think differently, and that's a very real perspective. I guess the final two things I would have is both internally and externally, especially, you need to communicate, you need to be relevant, and I think every organization has got to do that in some way, shape, or form. And I guess tied to that is really that on all these virtual events or a virtual meeting or a Zoom conference or anything, content is king, and you need to put your efforts into the content because it has to be good. Just think of those short attention spans, and The reality is people they're going to change channels, so to speak, if they don't like what they see.
Absolutely.
So focus on the content. Make sure your message is really defining what you want it to define.
Well, this has been great. We're at the end of our segment. Like I said, I think we definitely can regroup again, see some lessons learned in the next couple of months, see what's looking down the pike in the fall. If there's going to be a hybrid situation where small groups can get together and then there might be some virtual component of it, or if it's all still going to be virtual, I think only time will tell. But I just want to thank both Joe Gilderson of Corporate Audiovisual Services and Robert Sanders of HRG for joining us today and sharing so much helpful information.
Yeah. Great. Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Julia.
Enjoy this beautiful long weekend.
I would like to again thank our Platinum investors for helping make this entire series of virtual chats possible, and thank you all for tuning in. Be sure to follow the WCA on Facebook and LinkedIn, as we're sharing a lot of up-to-date news and information from all of our key partners and members. You can also watch all the episodes of the video chats we've done on our social media channels. We've done several topics like managing the remote workforce, cybersecurity, working from home, telemedicine, and several others. So take a look, and you can see our whole video library on our website and on Facebook and LinkedIn. And if you'd like to reach out to us and have any suggestions for topics or upcoming video chats, we'd love to hear from you at info@westchester.org. Again, the email address, which is also on your screen, info@westchester.org. And we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you for tuning in. Stay safe. See you next time.